it's Hailey. Happy Bookmas Day 7. Today I'm going to be sharing the books that I didn't finish this past year. So yesterday for Bookmas I did a vlog, but on Bookmas Day 5 I talked about the worst books that I read in 2021, and I mentioned that I was going to also be doing a video about the books that I DNFed, which is did not finish. So these are essentially books that I was reading them and either I just didn't want to finish with them because I wasn't into it, wasn't liking it, or I wasn't like far the way through enough when I figured that out that I ended up finishing it, which is why they aren't on my worst books of the year list, because I just decided to give up on them. So I actually did quite a bit of DNFing this year. It was such a busy year that I just didn't want to waste time on books that I wasn't really liking. So that's why, you know, I didn't waste any time. I just focused on the books that I really loved. So before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be putting out a new video every single day for the entire month of December, so you don't want to miss any of those. And I also will have the Bookmas playlist linked down below so you can catch up on any that you may have missed. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the first book that I ended up DNFing in 2021 is one that was so hyped up in 2020, and because of that I felt like I had to read it. I was like so excited when I picked it up. The cover was beautiful. I felt like it looked so good, but I immediately knew it wasn't going to be something I enjoyed. I didn't get very far through it and I just gave up. And that is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. So I do actually have another book by this author that I've had for a very long time and just haven't gotten a chance to get to yet, but that book is Uprooted, and I am still going to give that one a chance, but A Deadly Education just wasn't for me. So it's a fantasy and it's set in this school, and in this school you're basically like trying to survive. You have like this really weird environment where there's all sorts of monsters and everything trying to kill you, and I just felt like immediately this was going to be very, very, very slow, and I was not about that. I can definitely see why people would enjoy this book and why it got a lot of hype, because it is a cool concept, but the writing just didn't really mesh with me. It was very stream of consciousness, and that just kind of put me off because that wasn't really what I wanted for a fantasy story. So usually when the writing style isn't something that I enjoy, I might not give the author another chance, but in this case I think it was kind of a stylistic choice, so I will try Uprooted and see how it works out for me. But the beginning of this book with that like stream of consciousness style is also just throwing buckets and buckets of information at you that I just couldn't absorb it. And I was really confused as to what the setting was, what the world was like, and what the hell was happening. So I just took a step back and was like, I don't think this is gonna get any better because I am so confused. So that's why I decided to not continue with it. I know sometimes people say like you need to get past that first little bit and then it'll be great, but I just have so many other books that I want to read that for me it's not worth it to have to push past even the first little bit of a book. Like if I'm not really liking a book by 100 pages, I find that it's hard for me to actually continue with it, which maybe I'm not giving it enough of a chance, but I mean, it's not that deep. Like it's just how I read. So I would much rather pick out something else that I've been putting off and might enjoy than trudge through this. The next book that I DNF'd is Sky Hunter by Marie Lu. I'm so sad that I ended up DNFing this one because I really love Marie Lu. I love Warcross. I enjoyed The Young Elites, and what's the other one of hers that I've read? Legend. I really liked Legend as well. But when it came to Sky Hunter, I think it was just kind of a case of it being a sci-fi, and it being a sci-fi that contained a concept that I don't really like. So it's kind of like a sci-fi twist on zombies, and I'm not a big fan of zombies. That's definitely personal preference. There's a lot of people out there who really love zombie stories, but I'm just not one of them. I got 50% of the way through this one, so I did get quite a bit further than A Deadly Education, but when I'm at the 50% mark and I'm not really feeling things, then I think that is definitely like a major sign to put it down. I don't know if it's the zombie thing that kind of put me off from this story. It was just kind of like okay. I didn't feel like it was anything really special that kept me intrigued enough to continue with it. I enjoyed the characters. I thought that they were well written, but there was just something that I can't really pinpoint that was missing that just made me decide to move on to something else. So unfortunately it wasn't for me. Next is Simmer Down by Sarah Smith. I was so excited for this book. Like, I talked about it so much, wanting to read it and everything, because it's an adult romance. It deals with cooking. It's set in Hawaii, and you have these two characters from rival food trucks. I just thought, oh my god, that sounds adorable, but oh my god, it wasn't. I struggle with enemies to lovers, so I keep on trying it because a lot of the concept sounds so cute, and I felt like this one did, but immediately I felt like the love interest was an asshole, and I could not with him. Like, he absolutely was just a dick in the very beginning, and I could not get past that. Like, oh my god, I was like, okay, now you're kind of like starting this romance, whatever, and I was like, no, he's horrible. So I was so frustrated that I was like, I can't read any further, and I cannot. And the other thing is that I was expecting a story that was set in Hawaii, and very early on, you're not in Hawaii. You are somewhere entirely different. You are on your way somewhere else. And then there was like a suspension of disbelief thing where the characters are like sitting next to each other. Like, that might be a spoiler, but I don't think that's really a spoiler. It doesn't really mean anything. So once it got to that point, that's when I was like, okay, I'm over it. And I gave up on it. It just wasn't realistic to me. And I know it's a book, and I'm always like, I hate when people complain about things that are suspension of disbelief, like it's a book. But in this case, I'm gonna give myself a pass because it's me. But like, I just couldn't. I will say I enjoyed the Filipino culture that was brought into it. I liked the main character and her mother and everything, but I just could not with that love interest. Like, she deserved better and her mother deserved better, and it just, like, there were petty conflicts. There was just no thank you. Next is Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. This is another one I'm really sad about. So Aiden Thomas is the author of Cemetery Boys, which I read last year, and it was on my favorites list of the year last year. But unfortunately, Lost in the Neverwoods really did not work out for me. So this is a Peter Pan retelling, and I was like, oh my god, amazing. I love Peter Pan. I love retellings. So I was really excited. So we have Wendy as the main character, and her and her brothers disappeared a while ago, and her brothers are still missing, but she actually came back, and obviously there's a lot of questions for her, but she doesn't remember anything. So then it starts happening again, like a bunch of people are going missing again, and this Peter ends up showing up. So, you know, you can see the Peter Pan retelling thing going on there, but I just, I was so confused. I was 40% of the way through this one, so I gave it a decent try, but when I was 40% of the way through and I couldn't really tell you like where the story was going or what the story was or really anything about the characters, that just makes me want to put down a book. It annoys me. It was hard to really care enough to continue because I didn't feel like I knew the characters, and it didn't really seem like the book was going anywhere, let alone like where it might be going. Wendy and Peter were really one-dimensional, and the story as a whole was one-dimensional, so I felt like nothing ever really came together. I felt like the story itself was just super repetitive. It kept on like it was a lot of Wendy wondering what happened, what's going on now, and it kept on repeating the same thing over and over again. It was really like an eternal monologue, and it never actually progressed past that. And it just seemed like it was going to keep on being like this, oh, what's going on? Like this mystery thing where she doesn't know what happened in her past. She doesn't really know what's happening now. So there's a lot of questions, not enough answers, not enough action. And I just didn't see, like, I was 40% of the way through. So at that point, if nothing has really happened, I don't know if anything will. Next up is What's Not to Love by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. This I was so excited for because I've had kind of mixed feelings actually about this romance author duo's romances before. They write YA contemporary romances, but this one in particular I was excited about. Like, I have liked a lot of theirs. There's just a couple that I haven't been so sure about, and in this case I was really excited because this one kind of mirrors their own love story. They actually were academic rivals, and then now they are a couple. So I was like, oh, that's gonna be so cute. Oh my god, no it wasn't. So this is an academic rivals, enemies to lovers story where these two characters have to work together on this like big, reunion. They have to work on a high school reunion in competition to get a letter of recommendation so they can go to Harvard, and like only one of them will get it. So I just like, I struggle with enemies to lovers once again, but this case was like, oh my god. Their banter was not banter. It was just them like bitching at each other. I didn't get a lick of chemistry except for the fact that people kept on mentioning and they kept on talking about how everyone was like, oh, you just have a crush on each other. That's why you're always at each other's throats. And I was like, no, that's not how this is working. So when it started kind of like flipping to like a little flirt, I was like, where did this come from? You literally hated each other. You were like so incompatible, just yelling at each other all the time. And now you're all of a sudden like, ooh. So I didn't get very far through this one, to be honest, because I was really annoyed at the characters and I did not like any of their interactions. All of their interactions were just getting mad at each other for like the stupidest little petty things. So I was like, no, thank you. Next is A Fell Love Story by Luann Lee. So I was so excited for this book. Once again, I've said that so many times now, I'm sorry. But this one also deals with cooking, and it's a Romeo and Juliet-esque story about two, like, they are the children of these rival Vietnamese restaurants. And I was like, oh my God, that is adorable. But the problem was it was dual perspective, and I could not distinguish between the two perspectives because they were both coming from a restaurant background and they both had very, very similar voices. The only thing that was different was they had like a couple of different hobbies, but I kept on having to flip back to see which perspective I was reading from, and that was really frustrating. Once again, I got a little bit more than 50% of the way through this one. I got 56%, but I just didn't really like the writing, and that was the main issue for me. There are some positives though. It featured some really great Vietnamese American representation, and it touched on a lot of the trauma of that and how each of their families dealt with it, but it just, like, the actual romance plotline was so lacking for me. I think the two love interests should have been a little bit more distinct because, or it could have just been one perspective, because as it was, the dual perspectives really bogged the narrative down and it made it very clunky and hard to read. There also just wasn't a lot going on in the story. Like, you're seeing these two characters that their families are rivals coming together, but it's kind of, there's a question like, why are their families rivals? And I would have liked to get some inklings of an answer a little bit sooner to keep me going with the story. I feel like it was just a little bit longer than it needed to be, probably due to that dual perspective. And if it had been a bit shorter, I may have stuck with it. Next is Sky Without Stars by Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell. So I actually had this book for quite a while before I finally decided to pick it up. It's like a sci-fi retelling of Les Mis. And since DNFing this, I've been told by many of you that, oh, the first book, like, you just have to trudge through it and then the sequels are amazing. But once again, I am not the person to tell that to. I'm not really a big fan of series. So the fact that I need to get through a first book in order to get to better books just doesn't work for me at all, unfortunately. So I got pretty far through this one. Like, it's a pretty big book, and I think I got like past the 300-page mark for sure. But I just didn't feel like I cared all that much, and I didn't really know where the story was going. It felt like a lot of setup, and I don't like when books are just setting up for sequels. I want that book to be able to stand on its own and be good enough on its own for me to enjoy it. If I'm not enjoying it, there's no way I'm going to read the sequels. So even if I had read the whole thing, I probably wouldn't have read the sequels anyways, because I just, like, I wasn't really liking it because I was bored. I saw the connections between the two characters. It really, or the three characters rather, it was kind of setting up for some interesting things, but it was just taking so long that I was just kind of over it, and I decided to DNF it. And I'm sad about it because I did want to really like it, but it just wasn't for me. And the last book that I DNF'd in 2021, I'm pretty sure I got all of them. I may have forgotten a couple, but I'm pretty sure this is all of them. But the last one is The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joanne He. I was very intrigued by this book because it's about a girl who wakes up on this island and she just remembers that she has a sister that she has to try and get back to. She doesn't really remember anything else, and she has like this AI with her in a shack, and that's all she has on this island. So I was like, oh, it's gonna be like a mystery thriller sort of thing, but it wasn't. It was a sci-fi, and that's my fault. I didn't know what it was. I expected it to be something different. I've had that happen a couple of times in the past where I've read a book thinking it was going to be one thing and then it ends up being something completely different, and that totally ruins my enjoyment of it. So this did suffer from that. But the other thing was, I was reading this book, I was really intrigued, and I was probably like 2/3 of the way through, and there was like a big reveal, a big twist that I didn't see coming at all, but there was still a lot of the book left. So I was like, what's gonna happen in the rest of the book? But I didn't really care enough to find out because I felt like satisfied with that twist reveal, and I didn't think there were really enough loose ends to continue a story. So I ended up DNFing it after that twist was revealed because I'm not a huge fan of sci-fi generally. I do have some that I really have liked, but this one just seemed to be, I didn't know what was going to happen next, and I felt like we had enough of a reveal, so I just didn't care. So those are all the books that I DNF'd this past year. I find DNFing to be so liberating. I know it seems counterproductive, but I feel like it allows me to read so much more because I'm not like bogging down my reading by continuing with books that I'm not really liking. So I do always feel guilty about it, honestly, but I just feel so much better in the end because I moved on to something that I did actually enjoy. So I feel fine. I gave it a chance. Maybe it would have worked out, but I don't feel that sad not like following through. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's Bookmas video. Please let me know if you DNF books, if you DNF'd any this year, which ones they were. But also don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell tomorrow for Bookmas Day 8. I'm getting all mixed up now because I'm filming them all and it's just so confusing for me. But tomorrow for Bookmas Day 8, I'm going to be talking about the 2021 book releases that I didn't get the chance to get to, and I really wish that I had gotten the chance to read them. So don't miss that, and I will also have the entire Bookmas playlist linked down below for you guys, so then you can get caught up if you have missed any videos. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow in another new video. Bye!